How's it going, you guys? Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about iPhone photography, or more specifically, iPhone X, using that cell phone as your your photography device. So, a question that has come up is, how can I take better photos with my cell phone? And a lot of the times, just following a few simple steps that apply to every aspect of photography, you can produce better images with your camera, whether it's a point and shoot, a DSLR, or even the iPhone. So today we're going to talk about the new iPhone X, and we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do as a photographer or as a person who's just looking to increase your photography game with this cell phone. So a lot of times we think new phone, new upgraded camera. And this is definitely the case when it comes to the new iPhone. The camera has been revamped, updated, upgraded, and is really coming out with some really great new features. So when it comes to capturing better images, I like to think that it's not necessarily the device that you're using, but the techniques with which you're applying to your craft. So there are two very simple things that apply no matter what camera you're using. One of which being following the rule of thirds. This is a very old concept. It's a very old technique when it comes to composing your photos and your image or your subject. And just a basic rundown, crash course definition of it is on your cell phone or on your iPhone, you can go ahead and turn on grid mode, and it lays a grid overlay over the display. So you have two vertical lines, two horizontal lines, and pretty much where these grid lines intersect, those are your points of interest. Those are typically the points of the image where our eyes tend to wander. And so you'll want to put your focal, whatever it is you want the person looking at your image to focus on, you'll try to put it in one of those areas. You can also use it for depth. In your lower third quadrant, you can have foreground. In your middle, you can have your subject ground, and in the top third, you can have your background or your sky or whatever the case, whatever it is that you want. But you can utilize these lines to compose your image. It'll also help you with keeping your images vertical and or horizontal to the horizon. The other thing you can do is something super simple, and it's just clean your lens. I mean, we're handling these cell phones all day. They're in our pockets. We're on social media. We lay them on the lens on a table, so they're picking up grease, grime, crumbs, whatever have you. And one of the things that's probably the simplest is just cleaning the lens. More often than not, a smudge or grease will totally change the clarity of your image. You might wonder why your image looks hazy, why the light is just refracting just odd or differently, why shooting in low light conditions is a little bit more challenging for the camera to capture that image. And truth be told, I want to say 9 times out of 10, you've got to clean your lens. I mean, that's just common practice for photographers who even use DSLRs. When I'm photographing weddings or any type of engagement session, family session, I always have a cleaning cloth at the ready, so that when it comes down to switching lenses or having my camera at my side while I'm using a different camera, when I go back to that camera or when I swap that lens out, I make it a point to either blow off the lens or give it a quick wipe, and it just becomes habitual after time after time. With an iPhone camera, just using your shirt will suffice, but that's usually the common issue, especially when using the front facing camera, because you have that phone like to your ear, and so it's picking up sweat and grease and things like that. And it's very easy to just take a second, use your shirt, wipe it off, and you'll get super sharp selfies or whatever it is that you're photographing with your iPhone. The third, I've actually pulled it up online, but is to utilize the camera's features. And the new iPhone X has got a boatload of features. I currently use the iPhone 4 or the iPhone 6 Plus. So I'm way behind in the game of iPhone technology. But just looking at what you can do with these devices, controlling your aperture determines if you have like that depth of field, that blurry background, that bokeh, if you will. And just the facial recognition that these cameras have now, or that this camera specifically has now. It also has a wide angle lens, 2 times faster sensor, 4K video up to 60 frames per second. I mean, we are talking about photography here, but if you wanted to shoot video, there you go right there. And a 7 megapixel true depth front camera. My first cell phone camera, I think, was 1 megapixel. And those pictures came out really bad. So there in itself. And your front facing camera is also f-stop of 2.2. So to kind of explain what these f-stops represent, a 1.8, it's kind of like the iris of your eye, that at 1.8, that iris is all the way wide open. Now, your focal distance is really small because your depth of field is now dramatically tighter. So if you have an image in the foreground or you're taking a picture of yourself at f1.8, you may be in focus, but your background will not. And so just like when you are, I don't know, brushing your teeth at night, and you have the lights on in the restroom, and then you go ahead and turn them off and you're going to go to bed, well, your irises have closed. That's a higher f-stop. That's like saying that you wanted to shoot at f4 or f8. Now the iris is smaller. So when you try to shoot in low light conditions, well, now it's too dark. So having that, I was, I don't know, really know why I was going with that, but that's kind of just a rough explanation of the iris or the f-stops. And it looks like they have some like tutorials how to use this phone for capturing photos. This thing also has depth mapping. So it says that it's used to accurately separate your subject from the background. So again, just more things in the software that'll help you capture an image and give you that high-end camera feel and look to your photos just coming from your phone. Really great face detection, but I think that a lot of phones and cameras in general can really do that very well. But just one of the reasons why it's great to have just your phone be able to do it is because we post these images to social media, and you really cut that sort of turnaround. I mean, it's one thing to go out with your DSLR and capture images, but then you have to think of the workflow after the fact. Now you've got to come home, you've got to import those images, you've got to edit them, and after that, then you have to put it back onto your phone and then get it on the social media. So again, the turnaround time is now increased. If you're able to just cut that short and capture the image on the phone, edit it on the phone, because there are very powerful photo editing apps that are out there now, and then throw it out there to social media, it just makes the whole thing so much more smooth and just, I don't know, just really helps create that symbiotic relationship between capturing an image and getting it out there for the world to see. And I think that cutting the gap with regards to needing a DSLR, if you don't need it for what it is you're doing, like your daily images or capturing family photos or things like that, I think it's great that cell phones are stepping up their technological game and really being able to cut that gap. Do I think a cell phone's going to ultimately replace DSLRs? No. There's definitely a place for a DSLR, and it's wedding photography. It's where you need a camera that is a workhorse that is specifically designed to do this task. Now, you're going to have a lot of great photos from your guests that may make you rethink hiring a wedding photographer because, well, that's a whole nother talk right there in itself. But that's kind of the gist of just iPhone photography and taking better images just in general. I think with those two simple tips, cleaning your lens and utilizing the rule of thirds, that'll help step up your photography game, whether it's with an iPhone, a DSLR, a point and shoot, whatever it may be. Even if it's a film camera, these simple practices, they go back to the beginning of just capturing photos in general. So, and then relying on the hardware. Anytime you can have a device just do it for you, it really lessens that learning curve, allows you to just get the image and get it out there however you want it out there. If you want it printed, framed, seen on social media, any way that can simplify that, I think is great. So that's all I've got for today, you guys. I want to thank you guys again for your continued support and listening to these podcasts. I'm now posting these videos to YouTube, and very shortly I'll be able to solidify a standardized schedule on release dates for these podcasts. I have 2 podcast shows that I do. One is fitness related. The other is, well, this one, the photography podcast. And I'm just I had been going back and forth on, can I merge them into just being one? I don't really think so. I think that it's specific. It's tailored to what each audience wants to hear. They don't want to hear a little of everything. So having 2 separate podcasts for now is going to be the way it is. I'm toying around with the idea of releasing regularly on Mondays, and then my fitness podcast will still remain released on Wednesdays. But currently, you guys will get these podcasts for the photography show as they happen. So pretty much once I finish, it gets uploaded and that's it. There's no real schedule right now, but in the future there will be. So again, as always, thank you guys. If you like what you're listening to, be sure to subscribe. If you like what I'm talking about, be sure to leave a thumb, double tap, comment, like, whatever it is that you guys do out there. Reviews on iTunes would be great, positive. And yeah, as always, till next time. See ya.